When we say that man chooses himself, we do mean that every one of us must choose himself. But in choosing for himself, he chooses for all men. In other words, when I choose for myself, I choose for all mankind. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that every excuse you've ever made and every time you've avoided taking responsibility was a lie. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that to be the terrifying truth about human freedom. But what does that mean for you? In this video, we'll uncover the essence of Sartre's philosophy on freedom. We'll explore his concept of freedom, bad faith, and the anxiety that comes with truly understanding what your own freedom means. Sartre takes one of the most radical stances in philosophy when it comes to both freedom and responsibility. According to Sartre, we cannot shift our responsibility onto anything or anyone else. In one passage of Existentialism is a Humanism, Sartre provocatively states that if the voice of an angel tells me what to do, it is still me who decides that it is the voice of an angel. If I regard a certain course of action as good, it is I who will choose to say that it is good rather than bad. We are entirely responsible for who we are. We are condemned to be free. This freedom is essentially inescapable, unless we deceive ourselves. According to Sartre, we do this when we suggest that we are only free in certain situations. Sartre's entire concept of freedom seems to point to the heavy burden that choices bring with them. Whether we realize it or not, we have to make choices. There is no escape from full responsibility and complete freedom. We remain responsible for ourselves at all times. From this perspective, we are fully accountable for the consequences of the missed opportunities in our life. We are also fully responsible for others, even those we do not know. It is not because we close our eyes to the suffering of others that we are no longer responsible for the existence we currently share with them. If we do so, we simply avoid the appeal that lies in the gaze of the other, a term that Sartre shares with philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. Perhaps we can try to defend ourselves against the choice that we did not make to help that unknown person on the street. Nevertheless, we are responsible, Sartre argues, because not choosing is essentially also a form of choosing. The choice not to consciously engage with our existence and to carry the full responsibility that life brings. The reason why we are not only fully responsible for ourselves, but also for others, has to do with the way we shape our lives, which indirectly also affects the lives of others. Our freedom is relational in that sense. A freedom that oppresses the other ultimately also oppresses us. Yes, this seems dizzying, and the overwhelming feeling of guilty negligence seems unavoidable when looking at Sartre's philosophy. Rather than proudly and self-consciously carrying these responsibilities, Sartre's concept of freedom, burdened with heavy responsibilities, can become more of an inescapable guilt inducer than an applicable life philosophy. While the argument could be made that we have more freedom and responsibility than we often realize, we are also limited as humans and ultimately partly powerless. The question is how we can still authentically respond to the challenges of our time despite and within our limited capacities. At first glance, Sartre's concept of freedom seems to leave little room for development. Yet, Sartre doesn't leave us in a state of despair. Sartre famously said that existence precedes essence, which is probably his most popular citation, as it has quite literally been quoted to death. Nevertheless, what it means is that we are not born with a fixed nature or predetermined purpose. Instead, it grants us the option to create our own purpose through our actions or choices and how we respond to the narrative of the world that is being spinned around us. This process is the very thing that makes meaning possible. As we navigate life, we are constantly making decisions that shape not only our own existence, but also the world others inhabit. This is where Sartre's philosophy takes on a deeply ethical dimension. Every choice we make contributes to the kind of world we want to live in. However, Sartre warns us of the temptation to flee from this responsibility through what he calls mauvaise foi. In English, it is best translated as bad faith. This is the act of self-deception where we deny our freedom by claiming we are victims of circumstance or that our actions are governed by external forces beyond our control. Bad faith is the lie we tell against our own freedom. In that sense, we could argue that there's no point in claiming that we as humans strive toward what we usually understand as freedom in the classical sense. On the contrary, the human is a being that flees from it. From our freedom, we escape into work, religion, love, or even hate. As conscious beings, we are aware of what we do not want to know. Our escape is conscious. The act of escaping presupposes that we know both why and what we are fleeing from, even if it is something we refuse to confront. This is why every escape is a choice. Not wanting to know is a choice. Instead of seeing the situation as mine, I choose to look at it as fate, something I have to passively accept. For example, someone who feels stuck in a dead-end job might convince themselves that they have no other options. They might say, I need this job to survive, or I have no choice, when in reality, they are consciously choosing to remain in that situation. According to Sartre, this is bad faith. It's a way of lying to ourselves about the choices we have, even when those choices are difficult or uncomfortable. Living in bad faith limits our potential. We become passive participants in our own lives, drifting along without actively shaping who we are. People nowadays often complain about being stuck, trapped as corporate drones or wage slaves, mindlessly shuffling through the grind. Work, eat, sleep, repeat, day after day, with no end in sight. It's a familiar story. We feel like cogs in a machine, killing time until retirement, wondering how we got here and why we even bother. And trust me, I know all about it. But Sartre's philosophy confronts us with a deeply uncomfortable truth. If we feel like mindless drones stuck in a monotonous cycle, it's probably not because the system has entirely trapped us. It's because in some way we have chosen this life. Or, at the very least, we've chosen not to reject it. Think about it. Sartre would say that every time we hit snooze on our alarm, trudge into the office and tell ourselves, well, that's just how life is. We're engaging in bad faith. This doesn't mean Sartre would suggest we all quit our jobs tomorrow. Instead, he's asking us to take responsibility for the fact that we're still showing up every day, to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? And if the answer feels hollow, maybe it's time to stop blaming the system and start asking, what would I rather do? Not what's easy or guaranteed, but what's authentic to who I really want to be. In the end, Sartre doesn't promise us comfort or happiness. His philosophy is uncomfortable, but it's also empowering. It tells us that no matter how deep the rut feels, we are never truly stuck. We are always free to choose, even if the first choice is simply to admit that freedom exists. And once we do that, the possibilities, though daunting, are endless. Whoever, like Boethius, seeks comfort in philosophy should approach Sartre with caution. Sartre remains an unsettling thinker, a philosopher who refuses to conform, forcing us to confront the despair and inevitable failure of humanity's attempt to control itself. Yet, Sartre's viewpoint isn't rooted in pessimism. Sartre's vision of human consciousness reveals that in our coexistence, nothing is inevitable. Everything can change. Humanity has the power to transform its reality, both individually and collectively. That, in Sartre's view, is the essence of freedom. But true freedom requires us to face hard questions about who we are and what freedom means to us. And that's impossible without Sartre. We may not agree with every detail of his philosophy, but we must not let him disturb us. So, if and when you're ready to confront the burden of your freedom, I would say give Sartre's philosophy a chance. Not for comfort, but for clarity. And that brings us to the end of this video. Remember, what we've covered is just a glimpse into the vast philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more of our content. We'd love to hear from you what you would like to see covered next, so drop a comment below and tell us which philosopher, philosophy or idea you'd like us to explore next. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.